All right, for this last video for today, I want to talk a little bit about the Columbus letters and how I see them sort of alongside of the Native American pieces that we read. And then I want to highlight some of the better comments that I saw on the discussion board. Those of you who spent some time deconstructing what we read and offering up some interpretation, those were the folks who did pretty well with this assignment. Those of you who did not receive the grade that you hope, that was primarily because either one, they read more as summaries, especially summaries from internet material, or they did not provide nearly enough of your personal insight, and you need to develop that voice a little bit further. So, in terms of the Columbus letters, the very first one, the letter of discovery, is obviously about when he comes to the first encounters in the early Americas. So he unfurls the flag, he investigates and comments that he finds, quote, nothing of importance, which I think is really important because after everything that we've read in terms of that Native American literature, it's clear that he obviously encountered cultures that were very rich and diverse, but that he did not approach them in that way. He describes the, quote, wonders of Hispaniola, which are purely for marketability. The men and women he encounters are, quote, incurably timid, and I believe that's justifiably so. I hope you guys felt the same way. He's encountering people who have never before seen people of his kind, and they've lived, in relative insulation for centuries. So why wouldn't they encounter these people as sort of alien to them? Uh, he views their giving nature as gullibility instead of people trying to connect, which I think is really more indicative of who he was as a person and not necessarily who those early Native Americans were. Or maybe it did. Maybe it, you could recognize that. Whereas Columbus was purely seeing things from a marketability perspective, the Native Americans were approaching in a way to attempt to connect, which I think speaks volumes to what um, the original people to this country uh, tried to do to people who ultimately savagely brutalized them. He actually calls them savages, and it seems insults their gift giving almost at every turn. He ultimately takes some of them by force to learn from them, which is interesting to me because he could have, so it would appear to me, spend some time to get to know their culture without having to aggressively attack them or take captives. It seemed that they were more than willing to make contact with him. He describes the inhabitants in such a way that it seems he is trying to convince Ferdinand and Isabella that they could very easily come and secure the land, almost like he sees the inhabitants as, silly people who he could very easily control and overtake. He chides that the women work more than the men, and that he's surprised that he does not find monstrous people like he thought that he would. In terms of the fourth voyage, what we see here is that he is now pleading. So whereas he was really arrogant in that first letter, this second letter, he's really pleading for his life. He is in quite a pickle, and claims he has given all to them, pretty much everything, including his youth, saying that he began when he was 28 years old and now he's old and gray. He has little to say concerning his arrogance in that earlier letter. And certainly he has little to say in terms of the ways in which he treated the Native Americans. So I think some of the things that you guys did really well in terms of the Native American tales. A couple folks mentioned this interconnection between animals and humans, the importance of women. I want to read this quote in particular. I may be reaching, but it seems as if the story is telling the reader that there was order and structure, and the Native Americans were not savages. That is spot on. It also taught that good will win over evil. I wasn't quite sure about this particular post. In fact, I think that we must learn how to work with the evil we know exists in the world. So maybe think about that instead of just this notion of who wins out. It's more of what can we learn from each. Someone mentioned the Iroquois story is a battle between the good and the evil, very succinct observation. I liked the juxtaposition of this particular quote. The Navajo creation story represents pre Columbian North America as a very dark and troublesome place before peace was finally established and the twins ruled the world. In contrast, colonial narratives picture America as a very abundant and bountiful green land with fruits and beautiful waters at bay. That's a really great interpretation and comparison. Another one here, the brother of light mindedness continued to show his twin brother love and support even when he knows his brother means him no good. Important insight there. Someone mentioned, or a couple of people did, this notion of myth versus legend. I want to make sure that we're clear about this. A myth is any invented story, idea, or concept, imaginary thing or person. Mythical stories often contain heroes or deities and explain a practice, rite, or natural phenomenon. A legend, very different, is a collection of stories about an admirable person or significant event, non-historical and unverifiable, yet handed down from tradition and accepted as historical. My question to you is, can we necessarily say that the Bible and the stories within it are legend? For instance, we will read the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and so it'll be interesting to see you guys compare based on those definitions that you now have. In terms of Columbus's letters, a couple great insights. It was ironic how Columbus had become a prisoner and was ill-treated, much like the natives he captured. Great catch. My question to you, how can we connect Columbus's letters to the Native American narratives? How do they clash? And finally, one great quote from the discussion board. In the modern era, Columbus seems to be a victim of his own ways, as he too is now a slave, and he sees things different. For he is now a slave and is forced to endure the same mishaps as those who trusted him once before. So thank you all. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me an email or a call. And I hope you enjoyed these 2 posts. I look forward to seeing what you have on the discussion board for number 2. Thanks.